Shannon, you're not going to be surprised that I'm not going to get into what is now a political issue during a presidential election year. I don't think that would be helpful. I have one thought to add. It is that the independent judiciary means, what does it mean to you as an American? It means that when you're unpopular, you can get a fair hearing under the law and under the Constitution. If you're in the majority, you don't need judges and juries to hear you and protect your rights. You're popular. It's there for the moments when the spotlight's on you, when the government's coming after you. And don't you want a ferociously independent judge and a jury of your peers to make those decisions? Isn't that your right as an American? And so I just say, be careful.
This is Michael Popok, Legal AF. A United States Supreme Court justice just went on Fox News and threatened the President of the United States. There's no other way for me to frame this. Neil Gorsuch doesn't like the reforms to the United States Supreme Court that are being proposed by Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. They want to put term limits on the length of time that the Supreme Court justice can be there. They want to add new Supreme Court justices to expand the court from 9. They want to add an ethics code. And to Neil Gorsuch, his response, watch out, look out. Really? Watch out, look out? First of all, what are you doing on Fox News? I mean, you have to know that Fox News is a trigger, is a signal that you're on the alt-far right. Why don't you go on CNN? Why don't you go on C-SPAN? How about C-SPAN? You never hear anybody argue about C-SPAN. But if I'm driving by a United States Supreme Court justice's house, like Sam Alito, and I see upside down U.S. flags and other flags of the insurrection on not one but 2 of his houses, how do you think that makes me feel as an advocate before the United States Supreme Court? You think I'm getting a fair shot? Do you think I think justice is blind? Do you think that sends the right signal to the American people about what you just called the ferocity of independent judiciary? And the same thing when you go on Fox News. Now, I get that during your off time, the Supreme Court justices like to take vacations on the right, usually paid for by Federalist Society supporters for millions of dollars. You like to write books. You like to give speeches. You like to give lectures. You like to teach courses in international law around the world. I get it. I get it. You're not paid enough, apparently, on the United States Supreme Court. You got to bide your time. But to go on Fox News is to put a finger in the eye of America and put your foot on its throat. And what you're declaring is you're not ferociously independent, Neil Gorsuch. Okay? I don't know, you should watch that clip again. First you say, just listen to what he says. He says, he's talking to Sharon Bream there for Fox News. I really don't want to, in the middle, I'm sure you won't be surprised, in the middle of a campaign, I'm not going to be pulled into a political issue. But as long as you've asked, let me threaten the United States president and talk about and reframe the issue as sort of a straw man that has nothing to do with the arguments that are being presented in favor of reforming an out-of-control United States Supreme Court. In July, the United States Supreme Court completely rebalanced in the wrong way our 3 supposedly co-equal branches of government and destroyed any checks and balances that exist by making the presidency above the law in the immunity decision. They said in one sentence in the Trump versus U.S. decision in July the 1st on immunity, no man is above the law. No president. Yes, they are. They are by the very virtue of that decision. You now have a Leviathan, out of control, super imperial presidency on top. You then have 2 smaller things underneath, one called legislative branch and one called the judicial branch. That's what you got left. Barely tethered together because of their decision. And now on top of it, he says, listen to these words that you just heard from a United States Supreme Court sitting justice. One, he says, the majority that's popular doesn't need judges and juries. What world, what upside down world is he living in? Popularity ensures justice? We'll just put it to a vote. I mean, why don't we do that? Why don't we just have a game show every week where all of the important issues about reproductive rights and voting rights and immigration issues and national security and energy policy, why don't we just put it up for a vote like Family Feud? Survey says that's what he's trying. That's what he's trying to say. He says the ferocious independent judiciary is necessary for the unpopular. Donald Trump's unpopular. That's been our problem. I mean, it just makes no sense. And looking how Gorsuch's mind works is a scary proposition. And the judgment or lack of judgment he made by going on Fox News. How does he think the American people feel as he's thumbing his nose at them and poking them in the eye by going on Fox News? What about C-SPAN? No one's ever had a problem with C-SPAN. Go on C-SPAN. Go on cable access at 2 o'clock in the morning. Nobody would have an objection. But to go on the MAGA, red, triggering network, Fox News owned by Rupert Murdoch, that's your outlet? See, I'm funny that way. I like United States Supreme Court justices who seem to be independent, who at least try to act like justice is blind and that the scales of justice are in equipoise and are perfectly balanced. I don't like to drive by. Think about the American people driving by Sam Alito's house and seeing an upside down American flag, the sign of insurrection on Jan 6th, and another insurrectionist flag sitting over on Appeal to Heaven, sitting on another summer home of his. And now I got to be an advocate as a lawyer advocating in front of the United States Supreme Court for oral argument in October. Do I think justice is blind? Do I think I've got Alito's ear and that he's being neutral and independent until he forms his opinion? Or is he biased and on the far right? And what about Neil Gorsuch? If I'm looking at, it's always Alito writing for the Wall Street Journal, another Rupert Murdoch outlet, talking about in 2023, Alito said, well, I don't think Congress even has the ability to regulate anything related to the Supreme Court. And Gorsuch saying the same thing today. I mean, think of the book. Listen to the title of the book that Neil Gorsuch is shilling and selling on Fox News. It's called Overruled, not Overruled, Overruled. Too many laws in America. Just what I want from my United States Supreme Court justice. Him believing that there's too many laws on the books. Oh, it's so complicated and confusing. I can't figure it out. Except what he's really doing, what he really means is over-precedented. There's too much precedent. There's too much bad law from the past made by not alt-right wing courts, and I want to change it. That's what he means. It's not that there's too much law. It's that there's too much law he doesn't like, and he wants to ignore it, overturn it, vacate it, and recreate it in his image. I've talked about in the past what the rise, or actually the fall, of Neil Gorsuch, who we had some hope for, even though he was a MAGA right. We had some hope for when he was appointed, that maybe he'd be his own person and move towards the center. We're watching a little bit of a move to center right by Amy Coney Barrett, for instance, and to a certain degree, Brett Kavanaugh. I will leave for another hot take their politics and values and morals or lack thereof. But they've moved to a little bit closer to Roberts and further away from Gorsuch, Alito, and Thomas. Gorsuch, far alt-right. He's now voting reliably in the alt-right with Thomas and Alito. If you see an anti-democratic attack on our democracy or our Constitution or our way of life in a Supreme Court decision, you will see it joined by Gorsuch, Alito, and Thomas, that unholy triangle. Legal AF is brought to you by bookshop.org. You may be watching or listening to our show right now, but are you reading enough? It's time to dive back into books and conquer that reading goal you set for yourself this year with bookshop.org. There are so many great books out right now that help you make sense of this moment. Or maybe you just want to get away from the political and legal noise and unwind with a good novel. Bookshop.org has just the book you're looking for. Bookshop.org is unapologetically anti-Amazon. Why? Because when you purchase from bookshop.org, you're supporting local independent bookstores so they'll be around for all of us to enjoy in the future. They're committed to helping independent bookstores not just survive, but thrive and continue to foster culture, curiosity, and a love of reading in your community. Bookshop.org has raised over $30 million for local bookstores. You can even pick which bookstore you want to support, whether it's your local bookstore or your hometown favorite, like mine, Books and Books in Coral Gables, Florida. Bookshop.org is truly for everyone who loves to read and knows the power of a good book. I just finished reading The Nazi Conspiracy by Brad Meltzer and Josh Mensch, and it had me on the edge of my seat about events that happened more than 70 years ago. And thanks to bookshop.org, I had no problem finding a book that I was interested in with just the click of a button. Start feeling good about where you buy books. Use code LegalAF to get 10% off your next order at bookshop.org. That's code LegalAF to get 10% off at bookshop.org. And now you know, now if you had any doubts that that's where his head's at, I think there's too many laws, Mr. Judge goes on Fox. Look at the judgment or lack of judgment of Neil Gorsuch to go on Fox News and give this interview and then say completely disingenuously, oh, I couldn't possibly offer an opinion about politics during a campaign, but as long as you've asked, let me give you my opinion. Look out. Watch out, Joe Biden. Watch out for what? What are you going to do? What are you going to do against, like what I've said on Legal AF this past weekend is watch out for Joe Biden. He's not lame duck. He's unshackled, right? Somebody in our production team said it's 2 week notice Joe Biden. He gave his 6 months notice, and now he's going to accomplish everything he ever wanted to accomplish that he couldn't before. I mean, in 2021, there was a blue ribbon panel that was appointed by Joe Biden to make recommendations about the reformation of the Supreme Court. And at the time, while he had, running for re-election and lots of other policies to consider, he decided, I'm not really ready to take on that fight. He is now. And you know who's right behind him or right next to him? His partner, Vice President Kamala Harris, who we hope to be Madam President-elect Kamala Harris in a few months. And that's what Gorsuch is going to take on. It's always, we're not going to go into the political realm and go to the joint houses of Congress and watch the president give his State of the Union address. Oh, we couldn't do that. Well, why not? All the center and center-left justices go, but Gorsuch can't go. Thomas and Alito can't go. It's beneath them. It sullies their appearance of independence. I got news for them. There is no appearance of independence by the United States Supreme Court. It's a charade. They're bought and paid for by MAGA and the Federalist Society. And all you got to do is look at the rulings. The proof of the pudding is in the tasting. Read the rulings. Why is it that I have to give hot take after hot take about the attack on women and reproductive rights, making them second-class citizens? Why do I have to talk about another super precedent going back 40 or 50 years being ripped out of the books and out of the Constitution by the right wing? Why do I have to talk about a Leviathan out-of-control presidency that's now above the law? Why do I have to talk about the dismantling of the barrier between church and state established by our framers? Because of the alt-right, because of Neil Gorsuch. And now you see him, not tongue-in-cheek, but with a Cheshire cat grin, going on Fox News to talk about there's too much law in America. Yeah, because you're busy getting rid of most of it that's called precedent. We got to call this stuff out. It is outrageous. Sometimes I often look in the comments for a take like this, and some people slip into the comments that are on, let's just say, the alt-right, and the things that they say and write out loud, which what they think is impunity, because they believe they've got supporters in their camp, on the Jan 6 insurrectionist camp, like Neil Gorsuch. I mean, I heard him ask some crazy questions during the oral argument on the immunity decision, basically suggesting that a president could pardon himself. That's Neil Gorsuch, not just in a hypothetical. It was the way he asked it was chilling. That you could sell a pardon, you could pardon yourself, and you could sell a pardon. And as long as it's part of official conduct or core constitutional conduct, It's okay. Founding fathers would have been okay with presidents setting up a for sale sign and selling their powers, according to Neil Gorsuch. And I was like, wow, if this guy ever writes one of these opinions or gets his hands on one of these issues, we're done. That's why it didn't surprise me when he was in the majority to do a solid for the Jan 6 insurrectionists and take two of the highest prison term crimes off the books against them, that of obstruction of an official proceeding. Oh no, that wasn't made for that. That was made for something else, that law, when Congress got together in 2002. Yes, the words actually say that it could be applied to this scenario, Gorsuch and others wrote, but no, that's we can't allow that. They weren't trying to stop the electoral count. They weren't. What were the Jan 6 insurrectionists doing, Associate Justice Gorsuch? This was just a tour of the Capitol that had gotten out of control. Is that it? This was just tourism instead of insurrection. Have you seen the footage, man? Now I know who's seen the footage. The DC courts and judges. You know, the federal DC trial judges have all seen the footage. Thousands and thousands of hours of the insurrection. Watching the Capitol burn, watching medieval battles with an outmatched Capitol Police, right? In the Western Tunnel, in the West Portico, hand-to-hand combat by Jan 6 insurrectionists fomented and pointed there by Donald Trump. But it hasn't got up to the United States Supreme Court. They don't like to talk about those pesky little things called the facts surrounding Donald Trump. So let's not get whenever you hear Neil Gorsuch, Alito, or Thomas say, let's not get mired in the facts. They're an appellate court. They're only supposed to be mired in the factual record developed below, not making up new facts, not tossing out facts, not issuing opinions that are not tethered to the facts. You know, I know they would like to get rid of cases altogether. I can tell. This is to you. Associate Justice Gorsuch, I know you don't like to be an appellate judge. What you want to do is just be an imperial Supreme Court that just issues rulings having nothing to do with the cases before you. That would be a lot easier. You don't have to worry about the record. You just make new law. You want to be you want to be in the Congress, but you're not. And then to say that you are also unchecked. Presidency's unchecked, no checks and balances. Supreme Court's unchecked. I got bad news for you. Go look in the Constitution. This is the dirty little secret they don't want to acknowledge. They want to say you always have to look to the words of the Constitution. We're originalists. We're textualists, whatever that means. You always have to look there and only there. And if it's not there, then we're not going to enforce it. Go look there. I got time. Tell me where in the United States Constitution is the provision that about your role on the Supreme Court, about the Supreme Court's role of checks and balances, that they're going to be the one to declare the law of the land over and override Congress and the executive branch. Go ahead. I've got time. It's not there. That came out of case law and precedent, primarily by John Marshall, the first Supreme Court Chief Justice back in the 1800s, in which he established permanently the role of the United States Supreme Court in the three co-equal branches of government. Before that, and based on the text of the Constitution, it doesn't exist. So what do you do with that, textualists and originalists? It's not even in the text. You know what else is not in the text? The number of Supreme Court justices, or whether they should have a lifetime appointment. That all has to be fixed. And one way or the other, kicking and screaming, Supreme Court justices who are threatening the President of the United States with watch out. Watch out for what? Or what? Or else? Or what? I mean, I'm a New Yorker. Or what? What are you going to do about it? We have to have this conversation. Senator Elizabeth Warren, said the Supreme Court is on the ballot in November, and I agree with her. And now you know why. And he's put it. People like Gorsuch has put themselves on the ballot. I've said before, and I'll say it again. When they write the history of this particular combination of the United States Supreme Court justices, it will go down as one of the worst in history. It'll circle the drain of history, and so will Gorsuch. And defending yourself on Fox News is not going to matter. because everything we need to see is in your decisions and how you rule and what you rule on. We'll continue to follow it all on the MeidasTouch Network and on Legal AF. I'm fired up. Legal AF on Wednesdays and Saturdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and then on all audio podcast platforms. Just plug in Legal AF. So until my next hot take, until my next Legal AF, this is Michael Popok reporting. Heary, Legal AF Law Breakdown is now in session. Go beyond the headlines and get a deep dive into the important legal concepts you need to know and we discuss every day on Legal AF. Exclusive content you won't find anywhere else, all for the price of a couple of cups of coffee. Join us at patreon.com/legalaf. That's patreon.com/legalaf.